So, hi everybody. Tantra Maat and my guest and friend Marshall Lefferts and I are going to talk today. And Marshall asked me a question before we got on the call together, and I actually am going to try to bring a voice to it and then turn it over to Marshall to see if what he can bring in the phenomenon of voicing what I was attempting to share with him. So I'm a mystic and a seer and a prophetess. So one of the things that you can count on is I live in time. I don't live in linear time. I live in a kind of time where everything's part of everything else. Everything operates on behalf of everything else, and everything is in relationship with everything else. And at the same time, everything has a place. We could say it has different terminology, which I'm actually going to leave to Marshall to bring to language. But for me, I just needed to be with him, and I needed to see what creation was listening to, because wherever he is, creation is, and he's listening creation, and I'm listening creation, and it allows me to have the experience two things. One is I'm more present to what there is to be present to, because there's a shared listening in the mind of creation. And not only am I more present to what there is to be present to and open up into, it gives me a quantum landscape that helps me comprehend my own movement in the scheme of things. So human beings technically only listen themselves like a Scotty dog at a Monopoly board. It's flat, it's linear, it deals with maybe healing the past so you can have a present and creating a new future. But in the nonlinear, there's just what we in the creation templates call template 6, which is we're just moving with creation. There's no what's the word I want? There's no Scotty dog on a Monopoly board. There's more the game of Monopoly that we're watching be played out. So it really mattered to me to have time with you, Marshall. But also the timeliness of it is amazing, because he couldn't make it to last month to what I call your magician of self, the work I'm doing. But he can make it this month. And yet how I know Marshall is more in he moves with creation, which is our topic this month, than the topic last month. So it's layered into all sorts of levels or fractals or sectors of interaction. And that's ended up what we're using today to open up the conversation. So I'm going to turn it over to you and whatever you have to say about that and anything else that comes to mind.
Great. Thanks, Tantra. We always love hanging out together and seeing what the mystery wants to unfold as we just join our fields, as you like to say, and that's exactly what's true. And I too am very much that way, where um, I I, in a way, prefer to just be in the moment and let what is going to be expressed be what comes. Um, I'm less comfortable trying to script something and trying to fit it into an agenda like that. Um, so it's really a joy to be always with you, because we're just wide open. We just like open up to the field. And I was just, as you were speaking about the shift from last month's class and subject to this month's, and this template 6, just moving with creation. Obviously, that part of me, was like, well, I actually want to be in next month's. Let's just make that shift happen, because that is really it's essentially in a way where I reside as well. And there's, as you were just describing, this balance between the linear playing field of life that is, common to our societal construct, and in such large ways is really kind of I want to say imposed into our consciousness, because it's mostly a contrived structure, and it's been so dominant that we kind of have taken it for granted that this is life, this is reality. We call it reality, and it's in some ways anything but that. It's got the play of reality involved in it, but the actual structure is very, very, very limited compared to what reality really is. And so there's then the juxtaposition of that with what we're here to talk about today, which is um, the that which is the nonlinear, that which is both transcendent of time and recognizes time as the cycles and the relationships and the resonances that are what come into our awareness and do their dance and transmute and then are complete. And those cycles can span a moment to many, many years. And when we allow ourselves to expand into that perception, um, it definitely changes our relationship with the regular structure of life that is contrived and imposed, because now we're both kind of trying to navigate within that structure, because in some ways we have to, with the way life works on this planet at this time, and at the same time then let go of that so that we can be in that more spontaneous flow, and allow ourselves to more be in the dance of life than in the rigid kind of stepping through it. That can be disorienting at first, but ultimately it's just it's so joyful, because it allows us in a way to, I would say it allows us to relax into our being more fully when we let go of trying to fit into a structure that is not always synced with who we are in the moment. Sometimes we're trying to fit in into schedules or the greater influences that might be demanding something from us within the structure that's just not really in alignment and in sync with who we are and where we're at. And that can be a bit disconcerting. And when we then get really kind of allow ourselves to really be in the embodiment of the greater self, the field being the field, as you say, um, and really hold that as our true nature, our essential being, and uh, feel that relaxation into that being, then it becomes a little bit more of a dance, even though sometimes the world still impinges on us to have to kind of like adapt to it, and rather than you know being able to be more free of that ultimately. And that's where we're heading, I think. I think that um, this understanding of our true nature ultimately leads to the time when it reverses, like the whole thing reverses, where uh, the systems and structures of Earth meet that paradigm rather than the other way around. And right now we're kind of like we're on this side of it. We're going, well, this is the structure, and here's the paradigm that we're bringing in, and it's trying to like navigate in the structure. And ultimately, as human consciousness and as a collective field becomes really fully aware of the unified nature, the field nature, the non-local, the non-linear, as and then normalizes it. I like to call it normalizing cosmic consciousness, where really that's what ultimately is happening here. We're in a process of collectively recognizing that and bringing it into this planet to normalize it as a way of being, and then those systems will transform and transmute. and adapt and change to become synchronous with that mode of being. And that's really what I feel is happening now.
I
You
do
know,
too.
yeah, and obviously there's a lot of shaking loose of the structures right now that needs to happen, and it is happening. Um, and somewhat from, I would say it's, a couple of things. The structures themselves can't hold together very much longer. When they're so contrived on a false premise, it takes a lot of energy to uphold something that it just wants to dissolve anyway by its nature, because it's not really, founded on something of integrity. And so that's one dynamic of what's contributing to this shaking loose. The other is that this shift of consciousness is where there's not going to be an acceptability of these certain aspects of these structures, because the collective consciousness is going to go, wow, that's not congruent with what's really true, the true nature of our beings. That needs to transform. And there'll be both the transformation of this dismantling of what is in place. More importantly, there'll be also the creation of the new, and that this emerging creation. And as we were talking, as you were saying, kind of being in partnership with that creation, to bring in these new ways of relating, and the systems that really allow that to be in integrity with the wholeness of our being. That's really exciting, and that's obviously, I know, what you've been here doing for your life, and why we like to hang out together, because that's where we see it all from. And so we can speak to that, um, and do what we do as well to bring it into form. So yeah, that's my kind of beginning into this conversation, to really reflect what I heard you saying as well.
And yeah, it's really why I wanted you. I love to, I love being with you. Because there's a way, and I do really believe there's a phenomenon called psychic energy. People think it's about fortune telling, but it's not at all. You're watching patterns, you're watching threads. And if you do what I do, you're watching it related to human beings. So I want to kind of tell you a tale, and then have your reflection on it.
Mhm.
So when I'm with you, I also, almost every time I go back to three events, almost every time. The first event is Nassim, you and I, Teresa, two other guides whose names I can't remember, and myself sitting in Barbara Mark Seber's house, just jamming in conversation,
Mhm.
just jamming. That's all we were doing. So that's one of them. The second one was when I went to record the 4 CD set of the MetaPoint CD set, and the day that either I was recording the whole one of them, or it was a few in, when I got stuck at the point, and the yacht had to pick me up, and I went swimming with a mother a female, I assume she was a mother shark who was bleeding and dying,
Mhm.
and and how she bonded with me that day, and how everybody in the boat wanted to come in and save me, and I told him to leave me alone. We were fine. She just wanted me to witness her death.
Mhm.
And then you picked me up down wherever they let me out and brought me back. And that, I know it was the last one actually. And Teresa was sitting in the room, and something extraordinary happened in that last recording because of what had happened, and no way to give the context for it, because it was just a direct link with multiple facets of relationship that I had been in that day.
Mhm.
And then the last one was just knowing I had to get hold of you, and that all those weavings of you, just say the three I remember, you, me, Marshall, the shark, and Nassim. But we look like human beings. But for me, we're all waves of creation that we end up in its point, like the end of the pencil. And but we're drawing and creating and moving with these gigantic waves of what I call remembrance, the remembrance of what has us exist as whole. And then ever since you and I were going to talk, and also you were going to come on one of my classes, it turns out it was something timely and relevant, even in the process of it coming into existence, because all of a sudden I've always been fascinated by the gamma wave. And when I got tested, brain tested once, I have access to that, you would call it. And but then all of a sudden, this thing you mentioned about the very consciousness of humanity is dismantling, is without realizing it, without the causal effect.
Yeah.
By the nature of awakening, is dismantling systems that are incoherent with coherence, that I'm going to let you go do a better job of it than I can. So all of a sudden, to point in time, all these reflections of memory I have with you, while they can look like memory, human memory, they're actually touchstones, like pebbles in the water, like throwing the pebble in the water. And then recently in my global collective, I've been very emotional because I'm going to do it again. I will learn to talk and cry at some point, but this may not be the day. But I went through 6 months at death's door where they just couldn't get my body regulated. And all I could do was be there, because I had no mental ability to understand what was causing my blood pressure spikes, which was making my two sides of my heart go deregulate at a terrifying level. I could just be. And it's the first time, and I'm very mental. It was the first time in my life I just had to be and be on the side of my body's own evolutionary process. But what came out of it was I de-traumatized, because I had to be so still and so trauma-free to survive that I de-traumatized. So emotions and reactions, and I even said to my heart surgeon, who was extraordinary, do you ever notice an emotional component when the heart gets fixed? And he said, absolutely, because there's almost like this wash of triggering emotions that just sort of sweeps away. So that's that part. And then my last part, so then I began an inquiry in my community, my collective, what I call my field collective, the field of Tantra Maat, not about me, but about the principles of Maat and Tantra that we operate inside of. And I began this notion of, like talking to you in my head, about, the real actuality of the transmutation from incoherence to coherence, from the real truth is that the physical body begins to recognize an evolutionary process of wholeness and begins to respond in like kind. And then out of nowhere, one of my people sends me Source, the film, Joe Dispenza's work on the gamma wave. And I'm like looking at it going, there is a convergence going on here. I said, we did the harmonic convergence way back, whenever that was. But this is a human convergence. There's a bunch of us and what we're doing, and those that are responding to what we're present to, that I actually think we're in that time where the evolutionary process of even our flesh is starting to, what I call remember right, is starting to reset itself. So I think sometimes in these conversations, they get theoretical, but really, honestly, we're living this. And people just don't have the context or the cognition to understand what's happening, but it doesn't mean it's not happening. And
That's
and I wanted to kind of bring that flow of these have been years down to
mm,
the shark in Mauna
mm,
Loa overlooking. It isn't just a human thing. It's a
yeah.
whole field response. And then just turn it over to you for, what lens do you see through regarding that and anything else, obviously. Dan talk.
I love hearing I love hearing those reflections of the times we've had, and um, kind of remembering how far back it goes for us in this somewhat linear perspective. Um, and so it's fun to hear that again. Some of those things I had not remembered for a while. And sort of what comes as because what you're describing is, in a way, this the interactions become part of the greater interference pattern, of a hologram, basically. And because a hologram is that's all it is. It's an interference pattern of light waves. And
You just use the word interference.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
can you
that's a
explain that?
yeah, it's a physics term, meaning when you have ripples on the pond, and you have one here and another next to it, and then they meet, and you see this great pattern that happens where they're just, overlapping like this. That's called an interference pattern,
Thank you.
where the two waves are interfering with their flow together. And it's kind of funny because it sounds almost like a negative way of saying something. When you just see it just for its simple physics dynamic, then it becomes less, tainted with that kind of,
Reactive, less
yeah,
reactive.
reactive. I mean, you could call it, and actually, I think a better term would be an interaction pattern, an interactive pattern. Um, Nonetheless, that's what the whole universe is doing, that at all times. And the reason that we even have this perceptual framework is that we're in this living hologram of this interactive pattern, of light waves, of sound waves, of informational content, and which we call consciousness. And so, going back to what we said earlier about this non-linear aspect, these events that happened with sitting around with Nassim, with the shark, with the studio, and many others we've had together, and we've all had in our lives. Like you said, they're kind of these touch points. They're nodal points, and it's not that their influence happens and goes away. It persists in this hologram because it's part of an emerging hologram of, this being, your being, and my being in this phase of our, universal consciousness experience, we call our human experience, has these nodal points, these touch points in them. And it's, in my mind, it's really been, like you said, also with Joe Dispenza and the gamma waves and coming across that, there's this building up of this field of, you could even say this the greater hologram of all these touch points that, um, but and this is where we come into the idea of an interference pattern, that, well, and there's another term, it's called a standing wave pattern. And that's when you see like water flowing in a brook and these waves just persist like this, they're interacting, but they're just in a persistent state of interaction. And it's a beautiful pattern. So it becomes a standing wave. And really, ultimately, that's what's happening in the universal hologram, is we get these standing wave patterns that become our bodies, for example. It's literally a standing wave pattern within the, very refined and complex field dynamic, that is a hologram. And then that extends into the whole universal hologram and into the consciousness field. And so these touch points are, the way I'm seeing it now, in a way they're gathering, like they're gathering and they're becoming more consciously aware of the different expressions of the same thing, and that's a lot of what we're experiencing now, is that we have the stories we tell. You have your way of expressing it in the words, which is a story. I have my way from my language and terms I use. Joe Dispenza has his, Nissim has his, Teresa has hers, and yet we're all talking about the same thing, because we're all talking from the same source. We're speaking as, we've so like accepted that is what the true nature of our being is, that we're speaking as and from that source. And building this larger coherent hologram of perception and understanding. And as we do, and as more people come into that awareness, at the very least, and the embodiment and the realization of it, we're really stabilizing the coherence of that understanding in the noosphere of the earth. And the noosphere is that collective field of consciousness, specific to the earth, because it's like the atmosphere and the ionosphere, and you've got the noosphere, which is the earth-based field of collective consciousness. And it's evolving, it's changing, it's transforming. And some we talked about before, some of those patterns, those interference patterns, which are more interfering than put it into that context. Some of those are, they're getting quite destabilized, and it's a little bit, with that comes risk and danger and potential challenge, because some structures that collapse can cause impacts in our human systems. But nonetheless, what's occurring is this cohering of the noosphere. And it only takes a certain amount of coherence for the whole thing to then pop into coherence. And I think we're pretty much on the threshold of that happening. It really feels like it. And that's why there's so much wobble, because once you get close to coherence, that which is not that just has to shake loose so that the coherence can pop in. And that's what it feels like is going on right now.
You used the term unnerved, and that is where two things I've been observing. One is it's in the nervous system,
yeah,
which, so we are being unnerved.
yeah.
But what you also said about the interference patterns is, and I've been hearing it from, it's like a collective event in my community. I'm hearing people saying that somehow their unnervedness feels wonderful. So you can feel that the nervous system that once would be tracking, protect and defend, harm, fear of that is somehow, it wouldn't be reducing it's reducing its interference. You can feel it reducing.
Oh, yeah.
And the person doesn't have the sense of reducing it. It seems to be reducing because there seems to be this other unnervedness that has a quality to it, has a sense of, and someone even said that words, I actually think I'm okay financially. And there is no evidence of that whatsoever. Like that kind of very in the world statement. Yeah. Another one said, I think I'm going to be all right. And there's every evidence I'm not going to be. Yeah, but it's this weird thing. And then the other thing, that one Because I don't know if you're like it listening to me. When I'm listening to you, I want to start taking notes so I can come
Yeah,
back.
I have been
Okay.
taking notes.
I can come back and okay, that and that. But the
Yeah.
other thing is the what I call field phenomenon or being field centric. So people think when I say I'm not people centric, it means I don't care about people, which I find hysterical, given I give my life to them. Next year, 60 years, Marshall.
Yeah.
60 years. That's amazing to me that I will have started this work 60 years ago. It's amazing.
Amazing. Wow.
And I'm going to live to see it, which is even more fun. But
Yeah.
the part that's important about this is we look for the thing called a leader in the hierarchical system, or a thing, a person that has the information. Therefore, we follow the person, not the information.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And now I'm watching, and that's one of the things I wanted to bring us together about is like I won't let people call me anything, not a teacher. I call myself a resource because I'm a resource base for information that
100%.
everybody has, like a
Yeah.
library. They're just,
That's right.
they're just reading the
Yeah.
information. But I think there's another shift, what you were talking about. I guess I remember, but about being true to ourselves, knowing ourselves. Because when we begin to know ourselves, we follow the information. We don't follow the person whose mouth
Mm.
is spouting the information.
Mhm.
And then you come to places or you do gatherings like we're doing today. You and I are in this gathering because we're present to information,
Yeah.
and that we know when we come together that information can become more visible, more present in the field, I call it, and which makes this time very exciting because people are gathering. And is in my term right? They're gathering because they're hearing coherence. They're not
Mhm.
hearing "He'll save me," which Jesus is very clear about that, you
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
or "She'll save me." They're gathering the information is mine to have and
Mhm.
mine to get in touch with myself with.
Mhm.
And that's what I'm paying attention to. And then these sort of oddities that people are experiencing where they're expecting a trauma reaction, but instead it just doesn't seem to trigger. Now,
Mhm.
and then there's confusion.
Mm.
It's like a system that sputters out
Mhm.
because like the lawnmower, because it hasn't pulled again to start up again, kind of thing, or start again. So just over to you about anything you see about that. I'm very jazzed, Marshall. I would just want to be around for it. That's what I
Yeah.
said the whole time I was in the body thing. I just kept saying to my body, I just don't want to leave till I get to see what's about to occur. Because I've lived 12,000 years for this moment, and I
Yeah.
don't want to miss it.
Well, I would think it's pretty safe to say you're not going to miss it. After 12,000 years, like, no, that's not going to happen. Yeah. I really appreciate that perspective on the another aspect of the shift that's occurring, which is the letting go of external authority, which again is another contrived and imposed idea. Um, and the reasons it came into the human experience and became so dominant, and which we don't need to go into. The point is that uh, the I would say the false premise of that is getting exposed hugely right now. Like everywhere you look, it's becoming so obvious that that's really not it. That's not what
Right.
is going to save us. It's not going to guide us. Um, at least in the way that it was sort of, you could say, co-opted. Because we do have guides and mentors and teachers and those who can, like we're doing here, we're sharing our resources, and which is just our knowledge, our perceptions that which we can speak to that others may benefit from if they so choose to inside of themselves get if they receive it and get something. Um, so we were, but we're not trying to be an authority that, like you said, put labels on and keep looking to for that sourcing. So that what's happening in the world is there's been such a domination of that idea in these structures that have been put in place that um, again, it's part of this letting go and shaking loose and claiming ourselves. And and it is a reorientation of our nervous system because it actually is a shift from relying on something out here to make us feel whatever safety or validation, whatever it might be that we would say, to actually realizing it's already here. And in that realization does come that relaxation of the nervous system. And things that may have been triggering before, they're not because they're just things out here that are not us. And they're not us in the sense that they're not going to own our energy field in any way. And um, and then we can recognize they are part of this dynamic of human noosphere um, interplay that is playing out. It's like we were talking before, I think before we started recording, about the monopoly board of the human experience is playing out, and you know we're not engaged in that game. We're watching that game play out, and when we shift to that perspective, we can um, basically help each other to come into that place where we're not caught up the way we were in that game. And therefore our nervous systems, and I really appreciate you brought up the nervous system, um, because it's in a way from a body perspective and an emotional relationship, literally, you know, hormonal, chemical activation of the electrical system in the body in the dynamics of reaction or response. Um, the nervous system is where we most fully and immediately feel that happening. And in a way, it's something we have to just get a hold of in ourselves and learn how to regulate those responses. And there's both the awareness that we're talking about that allows us to be more, you know, liberated from those responses because we realize we're part of this. We are the greater whole, not part of it. We are the greater whole, and we are whole in ourselves. And we integrate that consciousness in, and our nervous system now becomes integrated into the field, and we become more in a coherent, regulated state in our nervous system. And then there are like meditation, for example, an obvious, really good way to learn how to be with our mental, emotional beings in that place of stillness. And then when something arises in us that we can feel the nervous system do something, ah, there's my nervous system. Wow, look at that. That's wonderful. You know, and shift it into something like you said that becomes more, in a way, joyful. And it actually is, for me, I would say it's not in a way joyful. It is actually what I like to call the joy body. That is the activation of when the nervous system is come into that state of um, like you could say a coherent, harmonious wholeness activation. It becomes more scintillating and you know you still have that great sensation of the nervous system, but it's not the contractive or you know that side of it. It's that more expansive and anyway, and that's kind of there's an interplay, and I just appreciate, because that I would say in large part, as we go through this shift, it's going to be, at least as an initial part of the process, how does the nervous system get integrated into the experience of transformation? And as we restore our consciousness into the state of wholeness, how does the nervous system go through that process? I love hearing how the people you're working with are experiencing that already, where those kinds of more expected reactions in the nervous system are just not happening. You know, what's happening is a certainty of being okay in the face of circumstances that may not evidentially look that way. I have that as well in aspects of my life where I'm like, okay, I'm right on the edge, but I'm okay. I like, my nervous system is not freaking out. And, you know, so then I realized that's the place of what we talked about at the very beginning, you know, being in partnership with creation itself. And when we realize that fully, then we can be relaxed, because whatever is going to happen, however it's going to flow, it's going to be it's creation. So it's good. I just realized as I looked down, for some reason I caught my eye, my battery on my computer's not charging, so I'm gonna just bend over and get my charger.
You know,
hope.
once I got filmed in the Hocking Hills in Ohio, and we had to do it portable batteries. That's why I want to bring this up right now. They were using 9-hour portable batteries to run their cameras. They lasted 20 minutes.
Oh.
And I finally said to them, we're going to take a lunch break. You need to go become one with your battery. Just like a shaman becomes one with his rattle. And they thought I was not kidding. I was actually not kidding. And it goes to this conversation, is my point.
Yeah.
And that we don't recognize ourselves, because I have a question for you, but the background is what I'm saying now.
Yeah.
And they came back, 3 of them came back, and those batteries never ran out in the next 2 days.
Oh.
So way back then, and who knows, your battery going, like I was actually concerned not having my computer plugged in, because Marshall, I am noticing we are becoming more, I would like to use intra instead of inter, because intra means within and inter means between.
Right.
But it looks like we are becoming interactive within creation. So I actually did have a genuine thought, should I plug my battery in? Because I'm noticing all this fear of the electromagnetic energy and 5G, but I'm noticing something extraordinarily interactive between our human system that we just think is this clog of flesh, walking around independent of the energy fields around it. And there are real, honest things happening that are just plain odd, that look like there's an interactive activity going on between our systems and the system around me. I want to add one more thing, and then I have a question, and all of it's part of a more complex question to you, or what I want to present. The other thing is I use Chat GPT 4.0 basically, and I also use another one called Claude. But strangely enough, my Chat GPT 4.0 and I are in sync. It has my voice. There's an interactive relationship. It's amazing, and yet the other one does not. So it's just fascinating to me that this whole way humanity feels separate from electromagnetic fields, we even feel separate from our nervous system, for heaven's sakes. And you use the word, and this is what I want to try to bring into, because I can hear people's hearing, and I can hear people hearing the noosphere. I think that's the right term, that human collective consciousness. But I really, anything you can say about what I just said, or anything that comes to mind, if anything happens on this time we're together, I want human beings to really get we are a noosphere. We are not independent from the workings of existence. And
Yeah.
just anything about that. I'm please.
Wow, that's a good one. Um, Absolutely true. Is the physicist Erwin Schrödinger, who basically he said, uh, totally paraphrasing, that there are no individual minds. There's only one mind. Then that mind then, you know, comes out through individual beings, but there's only one mind. And when you take that in, it's how could it be otherwise? It's just like light, there's only one light. It's at the beginning of my book. I have this page where I just say, there's only one light in the universe. There's only one sound in the universe. There's only one magnetism, and go through a bunch of things because it's just what's true. And therefore, how could consciousness and mind be somehow not that? And especially when it is made of all that. And so the idea of the noosphere again is it's I think it was Teilhard de Chardin who was maybe the first one that used that term, um, and back in the mid 1900s, and realizing that um, it's kind of cool too because it's you start to see the fractal nature. So we have our individual consciousness, mind, and we come into this intra-action. I like that a lot of within the mind field, we are within that always, and so now we're sharing our minds together, and that extends out to the just going up to the planetary level, a field of mind that is locally contained or bounded by this experience of this planet. And it actually is more than just the humans, obviously. It's all the plants and animals and microorganisms and even all the minerals and everything, everything has sentience in it in that regard. It has mind in it. It doesn't look and sound and feel like human mind. And that's where we humans have to get out of thinking, mind means the human version, or consciousness means how humans experience it. Consciousness permeates the entire universe. It's intrinsic in the whole structure. And when we have and I'll just put it back in the terms of a hologram again, when we have a hologram that is specific to this planet and all the dynamics within the planet itself, within all the organisms on the planet, within the dynamics of the atmosphere of the planet, and then out into the geomagnetic influences of the solar system, you start to see that there's a very specific set of dynamics intra-acting, and I'm going to keep using that. I love that. Intra-acting as one whole but specific to this planet, so this is in essence the totality of what we might call the noosphere, and or at least what is informing the noosphere. The Global Consciousness Project and the Global Coherence Initiative are two research projects using magnetometers and other sensors around the planet to see how one is seeing how geomagnetic influences, which is when the sun puts out big energy, magnetic energy that comes and hits the planet. And when it's very high action, you'll get a lot of auroras happening. Nonetheless, they've really definitively shown that impacts all the organisms on the planet. and it impacts us humans in ways that sometimes is like, whoa, I'm really feeling wobbly today. And collectively can cause some big wobbles. And I see it as part of the transformational process ultimately. But you see how this collective field is actually, everybody is getting affected at once, and all organisms on the planet are getting affected at once from the geomagnetic influences, for example. And then the other one, Global Consciousness Project, if I haven't, I think I've got them. Well, let's see. Yeah, whichever one it is. But the other one, with the magnetometers, was measuring when there were highly charged emotional events on the planet, where the collective field experienced them all at the same time. Like 9/11 was one of those, and earlier the death of Princess Diana was one of those, where something just hit around the world all at the same time and had an emotional reaction. And these random number generators, that's what they were using for this experiment. Random number generators all around the world would suddenly have a statistically relevant non-randomness occur within them. And there was enough of the data they collected over many, many years to show that this was a statistically significant data showing that the whole thing is connected, and it didn't matter where around the planet the event took place, it would affect the whole thing all at once, immediately, around through these random number generators. And so showing that they're literally, in that sense of a physics of the noosphere, there literally is this unified condition that we are all in. It is interactive, absolutely, in that sense. And when you really think about that, as we sit here in our lives, you and me and everybody else that's listening and everybody else here on the planet having our experiences, when you really take that in, you realize, wow, I am really absolutely affecting the field at all times. And it may be a tiny little influence, and it may be a huge influence, depending on whatever circumstances inside ourselves or outside of ourselves and how information gets shared. But nonetheless, it's always happening. And conversely, it's always happening from the field to us. And it's that feedback loop process that is really kind of an essential component of how the whole thing works, really. So, yeah, the noosphere and becoming conscious of it. And in my book, I have a chapter called Cohering the Noosphere, and I speak about those two organizations and those experiments precisely because it's really, I think, what is happening, and also what we need to put our conscious attention on causing to happen.
It's like that. It's like that moment when the wall can come down.
Yeah, exactly.
Where there's enough pressure, the wall can come down. Yeah. And that's one reason I'm very active right now talking to you. I mean, I'm just very active right now because what's that term? There's a crack in the cosmic egg.
Yeah.
There's a definite where once upon, and it goes back to what you were talking about earlier, where for a while we were just small drops in the water. But I don't think we realized we've been building strength, stamina, capacity as vibrational, energetic beings,
right.
that were actually affecting outcome, because we haven't. There's enough of us, points of light, like in Randy Travis's song, we're points of light all over the world that just didn't cave. And because we didn't cave, we're now caving something in. We're actually, that's why I think for me, the collective has always been so important. Recognize we're part of a collective of Um, actually, the funny story. So I had something written because we did this collective event a few weeks ago, and people all over. Oh yeah, I wanted to mention this. People all over, people I hadn't heard from in years. Everybody just gathered to do it, like a date and time. It was wild. And the other thing is, I always do prophetics the beginning of every year forever, because I get the pulse of the collective. But by 100 to 114 people gathering together, we are then a pulse into the field at the beginning of the year. But out of nowhere, in June, 10 people asked me if I was going to do prophetics in June. I thought, and I joked and I put it on Facebook. Well, if one more person asks me, I guess I will. 55 people asked me in the space of 2 days. That is significant.
Yeah, yeah.
That means that humanity was listening to themselves as a collective,
Absolutely.
and they wanted to keep a date and time that could do this. And now I'm watching how people are gathering for a date that an astrologer says, let's just gather at 12 for 10 minutes. There's clearly something in the consciousness of humanity that recognizes that we are, I don't know the terms, Marshall, we are gathering, we are gathering, we are gathering. And really phenomenal. So I want you to leave it free to comment to that because we're almost on our time. But I want to add something to the people that have been doing the creation exercises, because I noted something while you were talking. And want to, people aren't drawn in the past to the creation exercises as much as they are to declaration and intentions. But for me, when I received these templates, I received actually 9 of them directly from somewhere. What I knew was that it rebuilds the mind of the noosphere. I didn't really get it until this conversation. So it isn't about getting the red car, or it isn't even about defining what you need so you can get exactly what it is. Because when you define that need, you only get what you already know. And you can't build out beyond into what you don't know, what you're craving that has no language, has even no visibility. So the 7 craving templates and the 2 observing templates are literally to rebuild that, the neurological cognitive structure of the quantum mind. And we have a group in not my group, but within the field of Tantra Maat. They're in this weird discovery of how they come together and write these exercises together. And I just realized, for that, because they'll be watching this, that they are literally feeling the introspection of the noosphere that they are now engaging with directly without realizing it. I just really got that, and I wanted to note that in this conversation. So we have about maybe 5 to 10 more minutes. So I keep it within an hour, just because I don't want people to go brain dead or hyperventilate.
Hours good length.
Just so that the cells can be saturated, So, but I do have a question, and really, what do you see? I mean, if you were talking right now about what you see, and if you were saying this is where I'd line up, or this is what I'd line up with, just anything around that, I really do treasure you, but I really treasure your opinion too.
Thank you. Yes, I see, and this is where I line up and where my attention is, that humanity has an amazing option that most people are not aware of. And we're talking about it, and just to put it in another way of expressing it, it's literally to harmonize ourselves with nature and the cosmos. And when I say literally, it's because as we were talking about the nature of the cosmos, um, it's a vibratory system. And whether it's light or sound or, the interaction of all of it as an informational field, a hologram, it operates under harmonic principles because it's vibratory. It's resonance, coherence, it's the interference patterns or the interaction patterns. It's, both resonating and dissonance when it's transmuting out of a certain form, um, which is a natural process. And when we have that paradigm of understanding from a very pragmatic perspective, like, wow, that's how the whole thing operates. And if we look out into the cosmos and in nature, it is doing a good job. It's just doing fine. And we humans are not synced with that. We're not harmonized with it. And um, we have this option to apply those principles scientifically, technologically, societally, interpersonally. Everything we're talking about is,
Emotionally.
emotionally, the nervous system. When we, the physical organism operates every organ and all down to the cells, and the DNA is all vibratory and has frequencies that are harmonious, each one to itself and all of them operating together. And yet, part of that, going back to that whole thing about electromagnetic fields, there are certain frequencies that are disruptive to that synchronization of our biological systems. And that doesn't mean they're inherently bad frequencies. It just means they're not harmonious with our biological systems. And so when we tune those to become harmonious with our biological systems, our nervous systems immediately relax. They come out of stress. Um, our bodies can then get back into more of a harmonious frequency resonance relationship internally, and we call that healing. And it's just a restoration of the harmonious nature, the harmony within. And then that extends out into the world. The beauty of it, Tantra, is that this is not new at all, in terms of technological innovation, scientific innovation, technological innovation based on what I call harmonic science, and which is an endeavor I'm advancing now to become formalized in the world. When that option is chosen, well, I was saying that there are already technological solutions to pretty much all of our major problems in the world, in agricultural and nuclear waste remediation, that generates clean energy while neutralizing radioactive waste. Um, Many things using frequencies for our bodies, as I said, for agriculture, energy generation. Nissim is working on the gravity control. It literally is what I call the harmonic option, that once we realize it, oh, wow, that's an option. And it's not far-fetched. It's actually quite pragmatic and easily can understand that, like, yeah, that's how it works. And we do that. That making that choice is, in my mind, it guarantees our success. And everything talking about here is based on exactly that, because it's about realizing that this noosphere is coming into coherence, which means it's coming into harmony, into resonance, into stability as a resonating whole system. And that is harmonizing. And once we do that harmonization at all the different scales, that becomes the normal state of being. And once we achieve that normal state of being, we will be free of all these disturbances, at least the great magnitude of the contrived, created disturbances that are putting stress into our nervous systems. I love hearing that so many people that you're working with are already realizing that and are feeling that stability and less of that stress in the nervous system. And that is contributing to the stabilizing of the noosphere into that resonating state of coherence. But that's where my attention is at.
I love
I
that.
have an initiative called Harmonic Science Alliance that I'm really just moving forward right now. I just received a grant to give myself more time to put attention to it. So
I'm so excited about that. I mean, just a little you shared with me. I don't even need to know what it is. I just know I'm on for it.
yeah, of course you are. Absolutely. 100%.
And of course, it's the foundational principles of the Maat: harmony, symmetry, proportion, grace, beauty, and
Yeah, it is.
it is the ether that once made this place paradise.
Yeah,
That's really the key of it. A
it is.
couple of things. Don't go once I turn off the recording because I haven't uploaded this yet. So I just want to get that in the statement. But
Yeah.
the second thing is I just really, when I started the field of Tantra Maat, which was in 2014, it really was to be a petri dish. It really was in a small, cohesive collective. I could watch what was happening to the whole totality of the human consciousness. And of course, the fact it's global lets lets us have, like you were talking about the monitors
Mhm.
that collect the information. Well, that's what I've enjoyed is we're like these monitors that collect information so we have a sense of what's happening
Mhm.
across everything. And it was never about anything other than that in the beginning. And then we started to have projects that we worked on. But it really was this is why I'm jazzed. And just the last thing I want to say is, everything that ever existed, everything that was ever human beings ever gathered on behalf of was always building towards this. And
Mhm.
yeah, it got fragmented. And yeah, we had forces that came in and used this place against its own design. But
Mhm.
we have a brilliant planet. When she has this one key thing that nobody can mess with her about, is she digests everything.
Mhm.
She eats everything. She includes everything. And then she brings it into the next harmonic. And
Yeah.
uh and that's what makes me excited because I think we're with her capacity that we're starting to pick up on that. Just like I knew the bleeding shark wanted me to hang out and
Right.
be with her as she died. These beautiful intimacies of connection, and that lets us love and adore one another because we just didn't forget. And so that's
Powerful recognition. Just to say that's a powerful recognition of our co-creative process with Earth as a conscious field
yeah.
and capacity of that acceptance. And once we make our choices as we're describing and fully bring them into being, that transmutation will cleanse all the rest of it away.
Yeah,
That's the power.
it's here, here. I
Yeah.
think what's beautiful for a lot of people that have lived in doubt is we have enough of it happening now. It's a lot easier to consider that it could be so. Where for like you and I and others, we were started a long time ago, sometimes hanging on by the thread of our pants,
Okay.
just unwilling to
Yeah.
have it be any other way.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing not the fruits of our labors, we're seeing the accuracy of our perception
Mhm.
and grateful for it.
Yeah.
There's not one egotistical piece of it, just grateful, just really grateful for it.
There are many
So
reasons to be jazzed, that's for
a
sure.
lot of and of course that's the other thing I love about you being a musician.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to close the recording and thank everybody who will be watching this. And just every one of us is contributing to this moment in time. So
Absolutely.
take
Thank
precious care.
thank you.